Welcome to another episode of Expected Buffalo, the podcast. A little bit later this evening than our usual 9 o'clock start here on a Wednesday, but working on some things, so wanted to get that done before I jumped on. But before we get into the details, of course, Expected Buffalo, the podcast, brought to you by One Pie Pizza, located 2185 Clinton Street in West Seneca, open daily from 9 to 8, onepiepizza.com. All right, eliminated. That is what the main focus will be today. The Sabres have been eliminated from playoff contention for the 14th season in a row. Not a surprise. We all knew this was coming months ago, but official last night. And of course, it comes when the team is on a 5-game winning streak and they've won, what are we at, 7 of 8 now, or even 8 of 9. Of course, right? Of course, we have to get this to happen in the end of March and into April. We start to see this. That's the way it goes. This team, and that's where we find ourselves. Now that it's officially over, I think for me, it's been tough these last couple of weeks, kind of just letting this all play out. And I don't know, is the right word letting this die out? Maybe that is the right word to use. Because there's really nothing to talk about. It's, we've talked about these players. We know these players. We know, mostly what their good things and bad things are about them. We've beat that up over the entire season, so there's not really a lot to dive into, which makes it difficult from a podcast standpoint. It makes it difficult from a writing standpoint. But now that we're here, and we're officially at the end, not of the season. There's still 5 more games left they have to play out, but officially at the end of, being a playoff team this year, we can move forward now, at least myself, into, I did one offseason article, but we'll get more, into the offseason stuff now. We'll dive right into that. Of course, we're going to take apart what went wrong, what players had good seasons, bad seasons, who should be back, who shouldn't be back, the general manager, the coach, all of that, the coaching staff itself, the front office, any changes there. We're going to get into that. We're going to get into a little bit of that even tonight. But I think where we're going to start is reflecting on, I don't know, that it's kind of crazy in this league that it's 14 years that they're gonna miss. Ottawa just got in, snapped their 8-year drought. It looks like Montreal is going to get themselves in with, don't say how well they played, but finding ways to win games down the stretch here and, playing some clutch hockey. So they're going to get themselves in. And that's obviously going to be a little bit more frustrating that you're going to have 2 teams in your division. One for sure going into the season in Montreal, who you assumed you were better than. And then Ottawa, depending on who you asked. Early in the season, I was on record of saying I didn't think this was a better roster than what Ottawa had. And that played out, but that hurts a little bit more probably, that those 2 wild card spots, were eaten up by 2 teams in your own division. So I think before we can get ourselves to what to do to fix this thing and what moves need to be made, what roster pieces, what the focuses are, what the priorities are, all of that. I think first what we'll have to do, and I'll get more in depth to this in a written piece that I have coming up, but really divulging into what went wrong to put this team in the spot that they're in now. And it's really not one thing. It's a handful of things. Now, every single thing within that handful maybe isn't as important, I guess you could say, or as big of a factor as the other. Like, we're start rattling things off, for example, the power play. I think that has a more significant impact, being at the bottom of the league for pretty much the entirety of the season and never looking like it ever got its legs outside of a 1 or 2 week stretch here and there throughout 82 games. It crushed them. for a team that is the highest scoring 5-on-5 team in the league, to miss not even be close in the playoff race is really disappointing. And the power play plays affect them. They just couldn't be effective on it at all. Uh, during that 13-game losing streak, which is the point of the season, we're all going to point to and say that was where they eliminated themselves from the playoff picture. You have a functioning power play. Maybe it's not 13. Maybe you win 3 or 4. Maybe you get 1 or 2 games to overtime and pick up a couple loser points in that, a couple more than they did at least. That all matters at the end here. I mean, we'll see exactly when all said and done how short they're going to come. But, if it's 5, 6 points, I mean, we're talking about a couple games here that really comes down to things like that. So I think for sure the power play is near the top of it. The goaltending from Luukkonen in particular, primarily, is something that really hurt them. I mean, you went into the season hoping that you would maybe understanding you weren't going to get exactly what you got last year. You were hoping maybe close, at least, or at least average, at least basically giving you what Reimer is giving you now. A little average, just slightly above average goaltending. Just stop some bucks for me. And no, didn't get that. Goal save above expected in Evolving Hockey's modeling. Last time I looked, I think it was like 89th out of 90 something. That's just not good enough. And it's going to bring up the question, which we're not going to get too deep into now. We have months and months to dig into that. But it gets into the question of what you're going to do with that spot now. And James Reimer, as well as he played, is that really a viable option? Is maybe a B idea, I guess. But I don't know. I mean, how much do you believe this stretch here really is real for a guy of his age? It's great that he's doing what he's doing and good for him at the end of his career to put that type of, run he's doing together now. But that's not something I'm going to bank on next season or even really look to offer an extension off of. I think I want to stop short of saying you're getting fool's gold here because he is making the saves. He looks decent. He's not looking the other way and the puck's hitting him in the back. Like he's making the plays and he deserves credit for that. So I don't want to call it lucky, but I think it's fair to say it's not sustainability. Like what next year is he going to post a 12 or 14 goals save above expected season? Like no, it's probably not. And then you have Devin Levi, who's played well in the AHL, but what are you going to do there? Is he going to come up again? We talked a little bit about that last week. So, I think those are maybe your top 2 issues for the reason they are where they are. And then it starts to get down into, the deeper things in a sense. The blue line just wasn't good enough. And that's not a surprise. I mean, I think everybody, including myself, called that out in July or August of last year. This blue line just simply wasn't good enough as constructed. But they ran it out until they got Jacob Bernard-Docker at the end of the year. And, we'll dive into him a little bit here in a few minutes. But the defense you got what you paid for in a sense. That's kind of a weird thing to say because some of the guys are paid decently on that blue line. But maybe you got what you should have expected. You got a team that's inconsistent defensively and has turnovers at time, guys who are in the wrong spot, guys who can't make outlet passes, guys who turn the puck over, and guys who just, have a knack of making mistakes and you couldn't overcome it. Are they going to take the blue line seriously this offseason? I don't know. We're going to find out. They should. I would hope. What that really means, I guess, remains to be seen, with Byram and is he back, or are they going to do something else there? Or, Matthias Samuelson, I talked about that last week, that this might be the end for him. And then you have Clifton and, Bernard-Docker. Like, is he he's a restricted free agent. Is he coming back? All decisions that have to come with that group. And then you get into, your general manager and coaching staff, I guess, is where you can go next. Maybe we'll start with the coaching staff. We talked about the power play that falls on the coaching staff. I think some of the defensive inefficiencies fall on the coaching staff, of course. The inconsistent penalty kill, I think at times has been hurt by goaltending, falls on your coaching staff. And then I think just, it took Lindy Ruff a long time, maybe longer than he expected, I think, to really grasp this team and really grasp the work that he had ahead of him. And now maybe he's got them playing more the way he wants them to, but it's too late for that. And early in the season, I think he made some mistakes. I think with the way with lineup decisions and even in game day decisions, that he shouldn't be blame free of what this season's going to be by any means. Then the general manager. It's weird to get to him last in this whole thing because he's maybe the one that should be in the spotlight and the most focus in the year. I don't know, what would it be, 5 or 6? I can't even remember. If you would have told me in September that they were going to miss the playoffs by 6, 7 plus points, there's no way that Kevin Adams is back as general manager of this team or gets another offseason. Unless, of course, there's change and Darlene got hurt or something crazy happened. But Darlene had his injuries. Tate had, some in there too. But it's not significant time missed. A few games here or there. That's not enough to excuse what happened this season. Now, of course, Darlene missing most of that 13-game losing streak plays a factor in that, sure. But that gets into then, well, your general manager didn't do anything to help you. Didn't do anything to help this roster. He just let it crash and burn. And as I was saying, it's kind of wild that I'm sitting here comfortably believing that he's going to get another offseason. There's nothing here that has indicated, from what I've heard, or even signs that he won't. Him and the coach are talking that they're going to be back confidently. We never hear from the owner, but there's no anything coming out that would be any different. All we hear whenever that comes up is the owner having confidence in those two to figure this out and get going in the right direction. I mean, I said this a few times over the last month. I can't sit here and make a valid argument that he is deserving of another season. Or off season, that is. No, I mean, you can probably tell from things I've talked about in the past and interactions that I don't think he's as bad as he's made out to be in some sense. There's been, I think, a handful of decent moves here. I think there's a good bones or structure to this roster that just needs the final tinkering pieces. But the problem is you can't get the final tinkering pieces. And that's a problem. Because you gotta do part 2 or part 3, whatever you want to call it, of building this team. And if you can, I guess you could say do, let's say, part 1 of it, but not part 2, well, then this is where you find yourself. And that's why there should be a discussion on somebody else getting a crack at running this team. But here we are. And here we go into the offseason. And he could tell us about lessons he's learned and, all that good stuff. And I don't know. I'm not going to be able to sit here and buy it. There's the ownership aspect of all of this too. Especially it's coming out more like with the offer sheet stuff. Like, I mean, you're hearing it from agents, you're hearing it from teams. Like, it's becoming less and less of a secret. Teams are agents are openly saying though they don't spend all the money. They're not going to spend to the cap. They're a team will go after because they're not going to spend all that money, so we'll go target them. It's not they don't have the cap space. Of course they have the cap space to match any offer we throw at them. But will they? still to be seen. Still to be seen. All of that cap space that we talked about in July, August, September, October, on April 9th, still there. Never used. Never used. And that falls on the owner's hands. That falls on the owner just really having his hand. I don't want to say his hands all over this because I don't think that's the right word to use. But as you can say, it starts at the top. Maybe that's the best way to say it. That's where it all starts. And then it becomes a trickle-down effect of an owner slapping handcuffs on a general manager that maybe doesn't have all the tools to get the job done, that limits his ability to get the job done, and then he has to get the players he has to get, which aren't good enough to get where he wanted to go, and then he has to hire a coach to come back, but that coach can't hire his coaching staff, so that coaching staff can't implement the things they want to implement, or change things they want to change, or get an effective power play. It trickles down. All from the top is where it starts, and it's frustrating because that guy is not going anywhere right now. I know there's people that hope he is and stuff like that, but there's no owner that, if they can help it, are going to walk away from expansion fees for two teams. Probably they're going to be coming in the next 3 to 5 years. It's easy money in their pocket. There's no need to walk away from that. So it's hope. You hope that it comes together. The light bulb goes on. This is hockey. It's a goofy sport, and that's the craziest thing about 14 years is you didn't just have one goofy year. I'm excited. The Montreal Canadiens are not that much better than the Sabres. They're not. But Sam Montembeault makes saves. They got some timely scoring. They got some help from the special teams. You need a few breaks, a few bounces, and there you are. You find yourself in there. But this team just can't get there. They just shoot themselves in the foot every single time along the way. And I'm sorry to start like a depressing way to start this thing, but it's got to be addressed. You have to understand why you didn't succeed to be able to go fix it. And I would hope that they understand, as a front office, as a coaching staff, as an owner, what went wrong, why it went wrong, and since they're going to be back, how to fix it. And be realistic about it. Have real conversations. There's not many players in this team, 2, 3, 4 max, that I would say, well, definitely 2 I wouldn't at all consider, in Tage and Dahlin moving. And you can make an argument for 2 or 3 more that you shouldn't move outside of a crazy offer. And then everything else should be on the table. It really should. And not just on the roster, I think the coaching staff too. I think you really have to look hard. You really have to be honest with yourself. And I know Seth Appert is well respected by Kevin Adams, well respected by their organization. But you have to sit there and say, does him being on this team and potentially running my power play again help me be a playoff team next year? I can't sit here and make a significant argument that it can. Maybe he's back and he doesn't run the power play and he does something else. And, fine. But I hope, that they have real conversations and real look in the mirror moments as we go through this offseason and diving into what needs to be done to correct it. Okay. Enough of the 20 minutes of basically, I don't know, what do you want to call it? The last rites read to this team because it's all over. Let's shift to a few positives here. Let's shift to what is going pretty well with this team right now. Some things that are encouraging that we can take in the next season. And then we'll end kind of getting into off-season mode and what that exactly means. So positives. We'll start with Tage. Looks, I'm really hoping he gets that 50 goals. He's hot right now. Feels like almost every shot he's taken can go in the net. So I hope he gets those 5 goals. With 5 games, those 50 goals with 5 games left. But he looks like that guy in the control play, dominating, and that's good to see. That's good to have that going into next season. Maybe he wasn't particularly unhealthy this year. Didn't miss as many games as last year. At least I don't think so. And you hope that you again can count on him, which I don't see any reason you can't, to be that player again and to guide this team from a forward perspective to being a playoff team. So that's good. The other guy I think really we focus on a lot and he's getting a lot of attention right now because of the role that he's played on that first line is Zach Benson. He's getting those first line minutes, and I think I talked about it a few weeks ago. Long term, I seen this type of thing in his outlook. I didn't think it'd be this season that they give him the opportunity, or even that he would look as well as he has looked. But he fits in that role. He's not going to be a guy that I don't think is ever going to be a 20 to 30 goal scorer. I just don't think he'll have the shot for that. He can work on it and improve it, but I just don't think that's ever going to be there. But that's okay. You don't need that from him because of everything else that he brings along. His playmaking ability, I tweeted out earlier this week, that since March 1st, he leads the team in primary assists per hour. Overall in the season, he was third on the team in primary assists per hour at 5-on-5. So this team needs more playmakers. They need guys like him who get the pucks in the middle of the ice, and he does it consistently. He is an agitator. He is a dog on the puck. At 5'9", he's the guy. I think if you ask anybody, one of the few guys in this, one of the main guys in this team that you wait to play against, because he just gets in there so much. He's always in your space. He always goes to the middle of the ice. He goes to the net. He's not afraid to get in board battles. He gets in there and gets the puck, and he wins the battles too. It's not just he gets in there and he's annoying. He gets in there and wins and sets up plays, sets up goals, disrupts things defensively. And that's huge. And then speaking of defense, I think I said it last week, and I will say it again, and I will keep saying it till I'm blue in the face. Having a player at 19 years old be as effective as he is defensively is something that you rarely see. And it is going to be huge for them if this is a team, to take this team to being a playoff team and then eventually go beyond that. Before the podcast, I was looking at actually I more wanted to see where Kulich, Thompson, and Benson, rated from their numbers. So we'll get into that in a second, and that looks pretty good because that's my last. Well, there's actually 2 more things, including that I didn't want to get to in the positives here. But I was looking at expected goals against per 60 on forward lines this season that played at least 60 minutes together. The top 3 lines on this team in expected goals against per 60 that have played at least 60 minutes together. Zach Benson is on all 3 of the top lines. The number 1 team is Jack Quinn. Number 1 team. The number 1 line in expected goals against per 60 is Jack Quinn, Peyton Krebs, and Zach Benson. They played 91 minutes together this season. The second highest is the current top line of Yuri Kulich, Tage Thompson, and Zach Benson. And the third highest, or lowest, I guess would be the way to put it, is Dylan Cousins, Jack Quinn, and Zach Benson in 70 minutes together. So the 3 best, you could say it, quality suppression lines this season to play at least 60 minutes together, Zach Benson is on all 3 of those lines. If that in itself does not show you how impactful he is defensively, I really don't know what else will. I mean, defense is hard to see with the eyes. You'll see those plays, those breakups. I get it. And that's why a lot of, my defensive, I guess, belief in a guy, I lean on some of the numbers where, of course, you can see things. There's obviousness, but we know that Tage isn't driving that defensive number for that line. Yuri Kulich is probably not driving that number, although he's had some good defensive numbers away, earlier this season that I've talked about, early on when he first started. But, adding that ability on the top line for this team has always had a high scoring top line. And to be clear, that Kulich, Thompson, Benson line, they're still scoring goals. 4.87 goals for per 60. I think it might be the highest. It is the highest of any, no, second highest of any line this season. Play at least 60 minutes. I'm sorry, third highest. Expected goals for per 60. That line is fourth at 3.08. They're all pretty close. All those top lines, of course, all four, funny enough, all four of the top expected goals for per 60 lines all feature Tage Thompson. Not a surprise there. But I think that is a great mix. It is a really good mix of Kulik, who is a finisher that I think has playmaking upside, and I think skates really well, understands defensive zone coverage. I think is not at Benson's level, but I think still pretty decent in his own end for a 20-year-old. Along with Thompson, who is one of the best scorers in this league right now and an offensive play driver. And then you add Benson, who is your playmaker, your board guy, your grinder, and your defensive guy. I mean, especially as Kulik and Benson get better, I think that is only going to drive that line along. And, I'm not going to tell you Thompson's in for regression or anything, because he's not, because he's still, I think he's 27 years old. It's not going to change. But really, if you think about it moving forward, if he starts to come down a little bit, you have those two coming up that can make up for it. Now, I'm not going to tell you that those three are going to play 5,000 minutes or whatever the next season, every single game. Of course not. Things change. They move things around. But really, that is the bones of a legitimate first line for this team moving forward. And I think that if you want to take nothing else from this last month of this season and only maybe take one or two things away, I think that line being as effective as they are one of the things that you can take away and successfully put in your bag to take it next season and say, that'll work. Because nothing that is happening there is out of the ordinary. Now, a 16% on a shooting percentage, but again, you have top quality finishers in Thompson and Kulik, so maybe that's not too unsustainable. Maybe realistically they come down to 14% for an entire season or a longer stretch of games, but that's good for them to find that, and I think have that real mix, for sure. The next guy I wanted to get to is one of the pieces in the trade that they made in the Cousins trade, but not the main one, of course, because Josh Norris has only played 3 games, I think it was. But Jacob Bernard-Docker, I think he's looked good. And I think that's nice for the fans, and I think for Kevin Adams to have something out of that Cousins trade that you get now, or at least the rest of the season, that you were able to watch. I think that he shows... What's up? I want to put this. I think that he shows that he can be a piece on this team next year, but I think the important thing to realize is here, as I'm telling you that he's played well and he could be a part of this roster next season, my fear, looking at how successful it has been throughout their time together, is that they're going to look at Owen Power and Bernard-Docker playing together, and they're going to be like, we found it. It works. That is the guy we are going to put with Owen Power next season. Save some money, all that. And look, the numbers in, what are we at? 103 minutes. Their expected goals for on Evolving Hockey at 5-on-5 is 54%. Their shot share is 51%. Their goal differential is 63%. Goals against per 60, 1.67. Expected goals against 2.09. Expected goals for 2.5. I think all of these numbers, even if I look at them, are some of the best numbers that Power has had with any partner this season. I'm looking really quick. Besides Darlene, Bernard-Docker and Power have the highest expected goal differential. For any Power pairing, they have the second lowest goals against per 60, and they have the lowest goals. Let's try that again. is the lowest goals against per 60 at 5-on-5, and they have the second lowest, again, besides Darlene and Power, second lowest expected goals against per 60 at 2.09. And the second highest expected goals for per 60 on ice. So again, it has worked, and that's a good thing that you've found success there. And maybe it's more frustrating that you ran him through Samuelson, you ran Power through Yoki Haru, and whoever else they threw up there, Byram for stretches, and it didn't work. And really, I think the type of player you needed is kind of modeled a little bit after what you're getting out of Bernard Docker, a guy who could skate decently, who has decent puck skills to move the puck around. I mean, Samuelson does not. Yoki Haru does not. Byram does, but I think that there's some deficiencies defensively where Bernard Docker, by any means, don't get me wrong, by any means is some sort of defensive stalwart, but he's fine. He's good enough for somebody to put on your third pair and rely upon. There's still some things here and there, some turnovers that pop up, and I think Power in a sense helps get him out of that at times with his skating and what he's able to do, and that's why those two work well together. And I think Bernard Docker is also a guy that understands defensive positioning, and I think that helps too because that avoids them getting into trouble. He's good enough to feed off of in the offensive zone. I think he understands offensively that the puck should roll through Power, and he does that. Saying all of that, they absolutely cannot go into next season and think that that's the guy that can play with Power and make it work. No. The focus still needs to be to go out and get a veteran top 4 defenseman. Now use Bernard Docker's play style as something you go replicate, but a better version of. Doesn't mean Bernard Docker has to go by any means. He could be a third pair defenseman with, I don't care, put whoever you want there, Clifton, get somebody, I don't know, whoever on that third pair and play that role just fine. But you need to, it's what we said earlier, you need to be serious about your blue line. In putting Bernard Docker on your second pair next season, and let's say you bring back Byram and then you go Darlene, obviously, and Power, Bernard Docker, Byram, Darlene's your top 4, like, I don't think that, that's not going to work. Darlene and Byram can go back to being what they were, and we saw that work just fine. And the Byram thing, we'll save that conversation for another day because that's a whole thing that we'll eventually dive into and go through. But yeah, that's kind of a counter on, like, it's good that you're getting those results and you're getting a player that's helping you right now. But at the same time, it's freaking me out that they're going to see these numbers and be like, there it is. Let's go. We don't got to pay him a lot of money. It saves us money. We can go use that elsewhere and, all that good stuff, because that's the way we have to think about is cost saving things, of course, with this organization. Perfect transition into off-season mode, because that is where we find ourselves now. At least me. It's off-season time. What I'm going to get into, I think, probably into early next week, because like I said, I think the first thing you want to do is recognize what your issues are, and then figure out ways to go and correct them. So the first thing we're going to do is call out what our problems were, specifically why there were the problems, and then we're going to then look at what we need to do and what we need to tack to make it better. But I think there's really going to be a lot of fun. Maybe sounds fun's the right word. Good conversation I think we're going to be able to have here over the next, 4 or 5, what are we in June? 4 or 5 months, because August nothing really happens. And I think it's going to start soon. It's going to start, at least for me. Like I said, we've already started some of our off-season content. We're really going to get into it now, moving forward. But even we're going to find out officially, um, within a week, if or two, if Ruff and Adams are going to be back again. The anticipation is that they will be. So once we get that answer, then we can dive into that. And then once we find out for sure that Ruff is going to be back, then it gets into okay, well, what does that mean for your coaching staff? Is everybody on that coach staff back, or are you going to make changes there? And then that then devolves into a conversation you have, and then we just start ripping through it. We start ripping through a handful of things: free agents, trade options, priorities, goaltending, what to do with Byram, what to do with Paterka, offer sheet threats, splash in free agency, the draft. Can't forget the draft. Austin's going to start popping in here pretty soon to get some draft stuff going on. So, that's going to be important. And really, we're just, it's a lot. And I enjoy the off season because I think it's fun to talk about ideas. I think it's really fun to get into that, to crafting this team, talk about it, what things we can do, what can be different. That's always fun, of course. I wish we didn't have to start doing it in April. I wish maybe we could start doing it at the end of May or even June. Let's not get crazy though, but let's just say, can we maybe get into May before we have to do that? But for those of you that don't know, we really get into it here at Expected Buffalo. We do, we're gonna pop out 25 to 30 free agent profiles. We try our best to do a trade idea article for every single team. I won't promise you we're going to get to every team because some teams just frankly don't make sense to trade partner. There's no great options. So we skip some of those, but we usually get at least 3/4 of the league every single offseason, and we'll do that again this year. And then we'll get into the eternal stuff. We're going to get into what to do with Lukin, what to do with Byram, what to do with Paterka. Josh Norris, is he 100% on this team next season? Stuff like that. New coaching assistant ideas. If there are some openings, we'll definitely get into that. Yeah, I don't want to say fun times ahead, but at least it's not talking about a team that is losing and is going to miss the playoffs for the 14th year in a row. We can all try to convince and trick ourselves into things that they can do to make this team better. And then, of course, we'll hit ourselves with wet noodles along the way as we argue some of those ideas being good or bad that we all have in our heads. All right, so I think that is it for this week. So thank you, everybody, very much for listening. We will be back tomorrow for Mailbag Thursday. Send in your questions, xbpodmailbag@gmail.com. Again, xbpod@gmail.com. I think right now we're pretty light for tomorrow. So if anybody wants to throw a couple questions in there, I saved, some of the off-season questions people asked. I kind of skipped over them for in-season stuff, but now we're open. It's an open book now. Team now, off-season. Let's get into it. Let's get nuts here, as they say, as George Costanza would say. So yeah, send those questions in, and we'll go through that tomorrow. All right, I think that's it for tonight. Late night for those of you who stuck around and listened. I appreciate it. For those listening on the podcast stream the day after, also appreciate you just as much as well. All right, everybody. Talk to you later. See ya.